Hi, welcome to the Air Manager API tutorial video series. In this video we're going to talk about Canvas. Now we've already spoken about Canvas in a couple of the previous videos, and here we are on the API page again just to touch on what we've covered so far. So we in the first video we covered how to add a canvas and how to do a draw or a redraw, if you want to call it that, back to the canvas, and we covered some of these basic shapes. And in the second video we covered a few more of these more advanced shapes, just to show you what all the different ones do. And we drew a canvas with all those different shapes on it. So we're not going to cover specifically any one of those functions in detail because we've done that already, but what we are going to look at is we're going to look at ways to use some of those within an instrument, and we're going to look at a few ways that we can use some of those elements to create other types of graphics. So just a couple of examples there. So what I'd like to show before we start getting into the code, this is the previous code that we had from before with our initial test drawbacks, where we had the red square with the rounded corners and the blue circle, and we did a bit of rotating, and then we got into doing these redraw functions, which is our main canvas now, where we've been drawing all the different shapes. And then I've got a few other things to show you as part of that the end of that canvas. So let's just refresh ourselves as to what that looked like. So there you go, we had an example of all the different lines and triangles, rectangles, circles, ellipses, arc, two, arc, quad and bezier, all those in their different field or stroke, which we looked at, and how to colour these different instruments. So we've looked at the basic shapes, but they don't really look much like the sort of thing that you'd use in an instrument. So I'm going to show you now some of these shapes in an instrument that I've developed when Canvas first come out, just to try it out and see what was possible. And then we're going to talk about one or two more of these with some another couple of ideas for an instrument. So let's go ahead and run this instrument. Now you may or may not have seen this before. It was a PFD that I developed, as I said, when the Canvas functions first came out. And essentially what you see here, other than the surround here and the bezel, which are just PNG images, and the text, which is the standard Air Manager text function that generates the text, or rolling text in the case of these tapes. Everything else that you see in this instrument, particularly within the LCD display area here, is generated by the Canvas tools. So all of these little lines, you can do that with running images, but these were generated with the Canvas, the little lines, all these lines here. The little triangle there, that's an example of a triangle. It's inverted the opposite way around. We've just chose the coordinates accordingly to draw us a little white triangle there. So that's the triangle filled with a white. Again, the little lines on this side are just move to and line to lines. The overall black that you see in the back there is just a black rectangle drawn on, as is this little black rectangle here, and there's another rectangle drawn there with an outline around it. Again, that's a Canvas draw function using I think that one is a rectangle, it may be lines, I can't remember, but they're again very basic features. The attitude here, the blue and the brown, they are big rectangles that we move around and rotate. These are polygons. Now you may have heard me, you may not have heard me talk about polygons because we didn't cover polygons, but polygons are essentially a way you use the move to start your draw position, and then you just use line to basically draw out the shape of the polygon. We're going to be looking at an example for a polygon in just a minute, so that will become a bit clearer. But these more complex shapes, this here is actually, it looks like a diamond just sort of on its side, but actually it's more complex than that. There's some rounded off bits here as well in terms of that shape, and a custom colour of yellow there, obviously, to try and match up with the instrument. These are little rectangles that have been drawn on a canvas and rotated. So what this instrument has is it has a few different canvases. It doesn't just have the one. So where I'm wanting to provide a rotation, these ones are fixed ones, so I could have worked out the coordinates for these and drawn them, but they might have appeared a little bit distorted. So what they are is they are actually the same as this one here, where they've been drawn nice and square on there, and I've just rotated the canvas using that rotate that we looked at in the first video to rotate that one off to the right, and then I've got another one with that one rotated off to the left. This one is just a fixed one in the middle, and then these red ones, they move their standard rate of turn markers, and so they're dynamic ones, and they can move and rotate. So they're on again on their own layer, but that layer is not just a fixed move, as in a fixed rotate, as in these markers here. These ones rotate depending on a calculation on the standard rate turn. It's based on some data refs coming back from the sim. So you can see how you can interact dynamically with rotating the canvas, or drawing or not drawing something on the canvas at a particular time. So if you wanted a warning or some other thing to pop up, there's a couple of other features of this where that appears. You can draw them to the canvas, and then when you want it to disappear, then you can then stop drawing it to the canvas within your redraw function. And then these here are just lines again, move twos to get to this point, and then a line to there of different, you can see slightly different thicknesses of those lines, and then another rectangle at the top there in white. Again, that one moves and slides left and right, so that's on a canvas that I just move left and right. So the rest of the canvas is just transparent with that white object there, and they're all layered accordingly. So I want the red triangle to appear over the top of the white, so the layer that this one is drawn to is above or after in the code in terms of a Z order for how the canvases are layered. So that you can see how you can layer up the canvases with different graphic elements on each one to build up that picture of what an instrument might look like. That's quite a basic example, but that, I say, that was one that I did when the canvas tools first come out. So let's go back to our APL tutorial example, and let's talk about a couple of other different things that we could use the canvas tools for in terms of a practical application. So the first one I'd like to talk about is a dashed line. So we're just going to use line, but a lot of avionics they use dashed lines. A lot of nav displays have a dashed line, or there's a particular instrument that I was working on that needed a dashed line, and so essentially a dashed line is just a lot of little lines. So what this code here does is it does essentially that. It's just got a little for loop going on here, where it's taking a few parameters from the initial setup here, and it's and those are dash length. So I'm stipulating how long I want the dashes between the different dashes, how long I want the actual line, so the line part, the bit that's visible, how much how long I want that line to be, the total line, and then an offset, which I'm just using to position the line on my canvas here. So essentially it just iterates through this for loop, drawing dashes until it's got to the length that we've asked for, and it'll draw those dashes based on the dash length here. So it'll draw a dash, then leave a gap, and then draw another line, leave a gap, draw a line, draw another gap, and then we're just going to draw that in green. So let's go ahead and run that, just so that you can see what effect that gives. So there you go. We've just got a line, then a gap, a line, a gap, a line, a gap, let's play around with that a little bit and change that dash length to 40. So you can see you get bigger dashes because I've made that number bigger, and obviously if I make the number smaller, we'll end up with smaller dashes. There you go, much closer together. So you can achieve the desired effect, and obviously you can change the color, or you could change the width of the line. So this is, if you remember stroke, that sets the color here, and this number here sets the width. So we've got a 4 pixel line at the moment. We could make it a lot fatter than that if we wanted to. And there we go. So you can see lots of different effects that you could achieve. Change the length. There you go, getting longer. So you see with a useful little utility function that to draw a dashed line. So you could use that wherever you needed a dashed line really, and it's quite flexible in terms of being able to adjust to a different look, different color, different width, different length of dash or thing. And you could also add in a rotation as well, so you could start rotating this dash once you've drawn it onto the canvas, similar to how I said you could put that on a different layer if you wanted to and start rotating that graphic element as in the instrument I'll just show you. So that's a dash line. That's a good example of how perhaps you would use line. Then another one here is polygon. Now we spoke about polygon very briefly when I showed the instrument just then, and so a polygon is can be any number of sides really, and you're just basically going to use the move to and the line to tools to generate what shape, whatever complex shape you may want to generate, and then you can use the fill or the stroke, just like with most of the other shapes, to fill it, or to just draw a line around the polygon. So what I've got here is I've got a very crude shape that I'm going to draw for you here. We're going to fill it in orange initially. I'll leave the stroke commented out for the moment, so you can see what we're doing. So we're starting by setting our drawing point on the canvas, and then we're going to use these line tools to just iterate around the shape, and then it's going to come back. So in fact what we'll do is we'll start with the stroke, just so that I can demonstrate what we're doing. So there you go, you can see we start off here. So the move to starts our drawing point there, and then we've got 4 line twos. So you can see there's the first line, second, third, fourth. Notice I haven't drawn the 5th line. I could if I wanted to. Obviously if I was using stroke and I wanted that shape to be complete, I would have to draw another line back to the original origin move to point of 320 by 300, and that would draw a line back to there. But for the purposes of the fill, you don't need to do that, because what the fill will do, similar to what the fill does with these arcs, it will draw its imaginary line between the start and end point, which is basically there. So it will do that for you, and it will just fill that spacing for you. So let's have a look at that. So there you go, there's our shape, where's our 4 points, there's our start point, and then our 4 line twos, and then obviously because we've said it fill, it's just going to put that line across there and fill the rest of the space. Now where that doesn't work is if you've got points that are starting to go outside of these angles now, and you're trying to come away from yourself and you're not coming back. So it has to be like an enclosed shape, where these angles are, not beyond the point of drawing, such that you wouldn't be able to get this fill back in. Otherwise you're going to get some very weird effects. So that's polygon. Again, I've only drawn the five-sided shape here, but you can go to town with this and draw all sorts of objects. So if you want to draw little icons or little things for parts of your instrument, you can draw them and color them whatever color they're meant to be using the custom color ability of either using the hex codes, or you can use the binary format as well. Sorry, the decimal format for the color codes, or you can just type in the basic colors here, but that's probably quite limited in terms of getting the actual proper color that the instrument is meant to have. And then the last example I'd like to show is something maybe that you might that you might want to generate for a nav display, say, and that's a procedure turn. So I think I may have posted this one to the forum at some point, just showing the sort of shape that you can draw, but this is the code behind it in terms of how that procedure turn is generated. So you can see here it's a mixture of move twos and some line twos, and there's an arc in there as well for obviously the turn, and then some more line twos, and we finish it off at the end either with a fill or a stroke, and obviously we're not filling it because it's a line that we're essentially wanting to follow. So I'll give it the normal sort of GPS magenta coloured line, thickness of 2, and that's the sort of end of our procedure turn. So again, depending on what these procedure turns, you could have a few fixed ones already drawn in functions, and you could just call those ones, and it's just a case of positioning them and rotating them on the display as it fits your instrument. So let's go ahead and run this one now. We've got the procedure turn. There you go. So you can see there now, again, we start with the move 2, which I think is down here in this point, and then we've got a couple of line 2s. So the line 2 goes up to this first point, up to there, round the arc, and then 1, 2 line 2s back. So let's just for the purposes of that, whoops, I've commented it all out. There we go, we need the first one. Right, so for the purpose then, let's just have a look at them one by one. So we start with our move 2 and then the line 2, as I said there, and then we introduce the next line 2. So this particular one, it takes a little bit of working out, because you do have to do a little bit of maths here just to work these X and Y coordinates out for where you want, but really the maths isn't that complicated. And then an arc, okay, now that's on a 45, so you can see where 0.707 comes into play here with the maths for the arc. So it gives us a full 180 turn there at the top of the turn, and then the next line will bring us back down, and then of course the last one brings us almost back to where we began. So just 3 examples really, and the explanation of the PFD instrument at the beginning there, showing you some practical ways that you can use some of these shapes. You don't have to have them as big as this, as you saw on that other instrument, some very small triangles that were used to generate different shapes. The rectangle one you'll use quite a bit, triangle you might use from time to time for pointers, etc. The circle one you might use. These ones probably less so, but you can see there's a use for an arc there, and some extended uses of line, either drawing dashes or using it to generate a polygon and then fill it in, or use it as a just an outline of a shape using the stroke tool. So, you know, have a play around with these. It is very powerful. I'm sure you'll come up with some clever things and ideas for what you might want to use the canvas for in terms of generating objects, particularly dynamic ones on a map. I think the possibilities for canvas are very extensive in terms of the types of instruments that we'll be seeing, I'm sure, when people start to play with canvas a bit more, and we'll see a few different projects come online for using the canvas and what it can be used for. So I think that concludes the subject of canvas now in this third of the video series. So please join us again for another video. Thanks. Bye.